Have you ever felt like a victim in a game where the rules keep changing? That's the feeling when gas prices skyrocket, rent jumps, or when you look at your savings account and realize its purchasing power is melting away like ice in the August sun. A feeling of righteous anger wells up. Who is doing this? Who is responsible for this financial nightmare that makes all my efforts feel pointless? In these moments of personalized fear and fatalism, we turn to the prophets. In economics, those prophets are the Nobel laureates. But their work is not a crystal ball for predicting the future. It is a set of maps, drawn with intellectual blood and sweat, to explain why things never go exactly as we expect. Back in the 1970s, as the world struggled with stagflation, a grotesque combination of high inflation and stagnant growth, a weighty voice emerged. He was a small man with a signature bow tie and sharp eyes who dared to challenge the prevailing Keynesian economic philosophy, a philosophy many believed had failed to rescue the crisis. He was Milton Friedman, Nobel 1976. You were taught in school that the government could fine-tune the economy, that by injecting money or cutting taxes, they could smooth out the fevers and chills of the business cycle. It was a beautiful idea, full of state benevolence. But Friedman, along with an entire school of thought, issued a chilling warning. Good intentions often lead to unforeseen, terrible consequences. Friedman was more than an economist. He was a social philosopher who restored reverence for money and individual liberty. He argued that inflation is not an accident. It is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. Imagine this. Your government needs extra money for a project, but instead of taxing you, they ask the central bank to print more currency. To you, it sounds convenient. But to Friedman, it was a subtle act of betrayal against savers, as it silently eroded the value of their assets, making them feel deceived. So if the government can't save us from this instability, who can? And what does the Nobel Economic Prize force us to accept about the market's inherently chaotic nature?
If the market is not a perfect system controlled by clear rules, then what is truly driving it? Is it the invisible currents of human psychology, of panic and greed? Or are it complex algorithms that no one can fully comprehend? We always look for a hero, a single solution. But perhaps what the Nobel Economic Prize wants to tell us is there are no heroes, only difficult lessons, maps constantly being redrawn in an ever-changing financial world. The solutions we think are saviors might be the seeds of the next problem. Government intervention, even with good intentions, sometimes creates new bubbles, new distortions in the system. So what is the final lesson? It is humility before the power of the market, the acceptance that there is no eternal formula for stability. And perhaps the most important lesson is constant vigilance against false promises of a risk-free economy.
After the Great Depression of the 1930s, the world largely decided that the free market was a wild beast that needed to be chained. Keynesian thought dominated. When the market crashed, only the government, with its huge spending power, could jump in, spend, and create jobs to restart the economic engine. For decades, this was the unquestionable truth. Public sentiment was a strong validation. Only the state is large enough to protect us from our own greed. Then came the 60s and 70s. Economics is an endless battle between two faiths, faith in government versus faith in the market. And Friedman became the pope of the market camp, leading an intellectual counter-revolution. His work was a massive effort to revive the belief in Adam Smith's invisible hand, a belief that had been buried under the weight of history. The monetary school, the importance of the unseen. Milton Friedman and the disciples of the Chicago School put forth a simple yet earth-shattering argument: money matters more than you think. Consider Friedman's work on the consumption function, which explains our everyday choices. Previously, it was believed that our spending depended mainly on our current income. Friedman said no. He introduced the concept of permanent income. The core idea: when you receive a large bonus, say $1,000, you don't spend it all at once because you know it's a temporary event. Instead, you spread that spending over your lifetime. Conversely, if your income is temporarily cut, you don't immediately change your entire lifestyle. Why is it important to your life? It relates to the feeling of intellectual satisfaction and fatalism when facing policy. If the government cuts taxes once, it won't strongly encourage spending because you view it as temporary income. This explains why short-term stimulus packages often have lower than expected effectiveness, a validation of the public's general disappointment with quick-fix policies. Friedman demonstrated through extensive monetary history that the Federal Reserve's intervention during the Great Depression was not too little but mistaken and irresolute, exacerbating the crisis. He offered a powerful counter-narrative. Instability wasn't caused by the market, but by the clumsy intervention of the state. He restored the role of monetary policy, controlling the money supply, as much more critical weapon than fiscal policy, government spending. But if printing money is a double-edged sword, how can we control it without turning it into a tool for deceiving the public? This is where another school of thought, those who read human behavior, steps in to challenge absolute financial freedom.
Friedman and the monetarists reinstated an economic model where humans were rational decision-makers, creatures who acted in their best interest, could predict government policies and adjust their behavior accordingly, a concept later formalized as rational expectations. Though not Friedman's creation, it was a cornerstone of modern monetarism. However, another group of Nobel thinkers stood up and declared, humans are not always rational. This brings us to the behavioral economics school, a field that caused an academic earthquake, challenging the very core of classical economics. The behavioral school, when emotion takes the helm. The story of the Nobel Prizes for Daniel Kahneman in 2002 and Richard Thaler in 2017 is the tale of two friends who might never have entered the world of economics. Kahneman was an Israeli psychologist, while Thaler was a rare, open-minded economist. The core idea, Kahneman. With his late partner Amos Tversky, Kahneman developed prospect theory. They found that we weigh losses twice as much as gains. The feeling of losing $100 is much more painful than the pleasure of gaining $100. This is a validation of your deepest personalized fear. The fear of losing motivates you more than the hope of gaining. Visual example. Think about a used car. You might be willing to pay $6,000 for it, but if you are the seller, you demand $8,000. Why? Because you own it, and the relinquishing of ownership, or loss, hurts more than the extra money gained, or gain. Kahneman gave us a scientific explanation for this everyday irrationality. Richard Thaler took these ideas and applied them to economic policy. The core idea, Thaler. He demonstrated how we divide our money into mental accounts. You might be willing to pay $10 for a movie ticket, but would never pay an extra $10 for a bottle of water at the theater. Money is money, but in your head, entertainment money is different from necessity shopping money. Why is it important to your life? Thaler is the pioneer of the nudge concept. If you know humans are irrational and lazy, you can design the environment to help them make better decisions without coercion. Example, instead of requiring people to opt into a retirement fund, make them the default participant and they must opt out if they don't want to join. Participation rates skyrocket. This is a philosophical fatalism. We are flawed creatures, but we can be saved by design. It raises a gentle, righteous anger. It turns out the government is exploiting my psychological weaknesses to manipulate my behavior, even if it's for good. The designers of the rules of the game. While Friedman and Thaler debated state intervention, another group of Nobel laureates won their prize by creating entirely new rules of the game theory and auction theory. Roger Myson, Eric Maskin, and Paul Milgram Robert Wilson didn't just explain the world, they designed it. Example, auction theory is not just about selling a painting, it's about how governments allocate valuable public assets like radio spectrum to telecom companies. Paul Milgram and Robert Wilson designed a complex auction system to prevent large companies from colluding or making inefficient bids. Their work has helped governments worldwide raise hundreds of billions of dollars fairly and efficiently. Why is it important to your life? Every salary negotiation, game theory, your decision depends on your opponent's decision, every time you buy something on sale, every time you choose an internet service provider, all are strategic games described by this theory. They teach us that collective intelligence can overcome individual instability, provided the rules of the game are set correctly. But if everything is just a game and the rules can be designed to manipulate our behavior, where is the room for the individual freedom that Friedman fought so fiercely to protect?
This is where the Nobel economic ideas clash and create an electric spark. In one corner are those who believe the market is the truth. In the other are those who believe the market is just a story we tell each other. The battle over the efficient market. One of the most fascinating personal rivalries in Nobel history is between Eugene Fama and Robert Shiller, who shared the prize in 2013. They weren't just colleagues, they were intellectual adversaries who dedicated their careers to answering the same question: is the stock market rational? The Efficient Market School, Fama. Eugene Fama is the father of the efficient market hypothesis. The core idea: prices in the stock market always reflect all publicly available information instantly. You cannot consistently beat the market unless you have insider information. Why is it important to your life? It gives you a sense of fatalism and validation that trying to pick hot stocks is futile. Instead, you should invest in index funds and trust the collective wisdom of the market. To Pharma, the market is a magnificent information processing machine, free and perfect in a certain sense. The Bubble School, Shiller. Robert Shiller is the man who proved that the market is far from efficient, but rather driven by irrational exuberance, a phrase he made famous. The core idea is that asset prices, housing, stocks, are often driven far above their fundamental value by crowd psychology and the stories we tell each other. Shiller was the one who warned about the tech bubble in 2000 and the housing bubble in 2008. Why is it important to your life?
It gives you a sense of fatalism and validation that trying to pick hot stocks is futile. Instead, you should invest in index funds. The Bubble School, Shiller. Robert Shiller is the man who proved that the market is far from efficient, but rather driven by irrational exuberance. The core idea: asset prices, housing, stocks, are often driven far above their fundamental value by crowd psychology and the stories we tell each other. Shiller was the one who warned about the tech bubble in 2000 and the housing bubble in 2008. He gives you intellectual satisfaction when you say, "I get it. This is psychology, not math." Awarding the Nobel to these two rivals simultaneously was a profound philosophical act. It validated that the truth lies in the middle. The market is both rational and irrational. Behind the scenes, the prize that wasn't a Nobel. It's crucial to note that the Nobel Prize in Economics is not actually one of the 5 original prizes established by the will of Alfred Nobel. Its formal name is the Sveriges Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel. This behind-the-scenes detail sparks a mild righteous anger in academic circles. The argument is that the Nobel label was intended to elevate the prestige of economic science, a field considered by some to be softer than physics or medicine. It raises a question about the absolute authority of the award and sparks curiosity about the political motives behind this recognition. Yet, regardless of its origins, the prize has fulfilled its purpose. It has collected and celebrated the most crucial models and narratives that help us comprehend the financial chaos we live in. So where are we now, when the market is both Friedman's perfect machine and Kahneman's flawed psychological playground? Does this mean everything is just chance? Or is there something we can do to reclaim control of our financial lives?
We began with a righteous anger about inflation, the feeling of being deceived as our purchasing power was silently eroded by the state. We heard the powerful voice of Milton Friedman, who restored the reverence for money and the free market. His lesson was a call for individual freedom and a deep skepticism toward government intervention. For Friedman, the solution to instability was strict monetary discipline and letting the market self-correct. But then we met the psychologists and the rule designers, who offered a darker view of human nature. Kahneman and Thaler taught us, you are your own worst enemy. Your irrationality, loss aversion, cognitive laziness is the main driver of bubbles and bad choices. So, what is the collective message from these great Nobel economic minds? It's not a formula. It's a painful awakening that provides validation for our own chaotic emotions. The market is neither a soulless, perfectly rational entity, as Fama described, nor a completely chaotic monster, as Shiller warned. The market is a mirror reflecting ourselves. When the market soars irrationally, it is our collective greed and exuberance being reflected. When it crashes, it is our amplified fear and personalized anxiety.
The Nobel Economics, in all its complexity, has offered us a new philosophical perspective to confront a time of instability. 1. Embrace fatalism. Friedman's work teaches that there are forces, like monetary policy, you cannot control. Instead of righteous anger, build a personal defense, discipline in long-term savings and investing. 2. Translate personalized fear into knowledge. Kahneman teaches us that cognitive biases are natural. Knowing you are prone to overpricing what you own and being overly risk-averse to loss allows you to design safeguards to protect yourself from impulsive decisions. 3. Respect the rules of the game. The auction theory winners proved that structure is more important than intention. We can't trust our rationality, but we can trust a system carefully designed to counteract human weakness. In short, the Nobel economic scientists did not deliver a financial secret. They offered a choice. Either you submit to the market's chaos without understanding it, or you use intellect to understand the psychological and political nature of that chaos. The Nobel Prize in Economics is an invitation to overcome fear, not by seeking a savior, be it the government or a market guru, but by achieving intellectual satisfaction from comprehending the very forces that shape your financial destiny.